Hello, beautiful patrons. Let's go for a ride and hope it doesn't rain. It's starting to look dark all of a sudden. If nothing else, this video may be nothing more than me pulling over very quickly and putting the top back up. But if this works, my desire is to talk to you for just a little bit about being alone. And this subject of being alone is something that I struggle with. And I actually struggle with it a lot. And driving through town, heading from my home, heading to my old home, most of the time when you hear me refer to home, you hear me refer to DeRidder, Louisiana, and that is where I live now. But I was raised in a little town north of DeRidder named Rosepine. I was actually born in the DeRidder Hospital, but went to Rosepine Elementary and High School. And so I'm heading towards Rosepine to visit with my mother. But being out and about, driving through both DeRidder and through Rosepine, I'm reminded of the little island that we've created, a little emotional fortress of solitude that we've created inside our little home, because there are just not that many people in this town that we're able to connect with and feel as if we have a lot in common with. And so the feeling of isolation, the feeling of being alone, is one that is always present and is always having to be dealt with. But what I have found to be most interesting about this experience is that it has forced me to deal with both larger concepts such as loneliness in its totality, and also deeper concepts such as what does it mean to recognize, acknowledge, and cope with your individuality. The fact that no matter how great your relationships may be, there will always, at the end of the day, or during the dark of night, when you're completely by yourself, not necessarily physically, but by yourself in your own head, you're always forced to recognize the separateness, how separate you are from every other person on the planet, how separate you are. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great philosophies, some of which border on metaphysical, that try to deal with this separation and make good physical arguments, mechanical arguments almost, for there not being actually any separation of any kind between anyone or anything. And so I understand that on a physical level. But psychologically, emotionally, we all know that we have to deal with this individuality, this separateness, the fact that we tend to our own stomachs, we live within our own minds, we are the central character, the main character of our own movies, our own life movies, our own dramas, sometimes thrillers, sometimes horror movies, sometimes a comedy, hopefully at least once in each life a romantic comedy. So what have I learned through my experience? Today is 4 years to the day that Paul Aaron and I walked into the elevator at the Houston Hotel housing the Texas Free Thought Convention, pressed the button for either floor 31 or 33, I don't remember now, it was one of those, and slowly made our ascent to Dawkins' hotel room. Elizabeth Cornwell had been gracious enough to set up an appointment for Paul and I, and we were fortunate enough that this appointment took place shortly after Dawkins had visited with Hitchens, preparing for the night's event where Hitchens would receive the Dawkins Award. What have I learned since then? Having no idea at that moment that life would bring such isolation, that our family would be in many ways tore apart, that every relationship would be questioned. What have we learned through all of this trial and trauma? Well, one of the most important things that I've learned has been to value ourselves, to value our independence, to value our individuality, and to value our individual values. I would have never dreamed that there could be such emotional reward for staying true to your thoughts, staying true to your worldview as you perceive it, being brave enough to express the changes in that worldview as they transpire. I would have never dreamed that there was a level of, for lack of better words, pride. Maybe it's self. I don't want to make it too much, nor do I want to diminish it. But at the same time, it's gratifying to be the continuity of your own story. And loneliness creates an insulary condition which allows you the time and energy to be introspective, to learn more about yourself, to learn what it is that you should be defending, what it is that you should be representing, what it is that you should be expressing. There's something extremely powerful about standing alone. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got Paul Aaron, who obviously has been my hero. In the old school, I would have referred to him as my armor bearer. If you don't get that meaning, then when you get an extra moment, look it up. But at the same time, we all stand alone. No matter how much support we actually have, we all stand alone within our own minds, within our own hearts. And so when rejection comes, when separation comes, it's actually a gift in disguise in so many ways, because you may have always been otherwise too distracted to ever fully investigate you, to investigate your true self, to investigate your own priorities, to become intimately aware of your uniqueness. Whether we truly perceive it or not, the game is rigged in such a way that in order to function within most of society, whether it is within relationships or whether it is at work, whether it's the game of economy, whether it's the game of popularity, whatever it is, in some way, it seems like more times than not, subconsciously, the game is drawing us towards conformity, being the best at being what everyone else wants to be, clearly representing this idea that is oftentimes branded as being individuality. But then when you look around, when you walk into the mall and you see youth that are supposed to be the epitome of individual expression, and they all look exactly like the same people that they're hanging out with. They look exactly like their peer group. That's nature, that's natural, that's part of social development, that's part of the social structure. And my only point of bringing it up is not necessarily as criticism, but to emphasize that we don't always even know that that is a system, a game that we need to break out of. And so when something comes along, when a controversy comes along, when a situation such as us very innocently posting the picture of Dawkins, when something comes along in life that forces you out of the game, that literally disqualifies you from the game, disqualifies you from running for mayor, from being a politician, from being a leader within your community, or even forces you out of a relationship that you went into very naive. When something comes along and it forces you out of the game and forces you into isolation, that's a gift. That's when you begin to discover the real you. And whatever the subject is that pushed you out, it's just the first subject of many. Or at least that's been my experience, that it's just the first subject of many that you will now begin to address, and you will now begin to study and understand in some depth that once again you probably never would have even thought about doing had this thing not come along. Falling back once again to the old school, I can't help but think of the trope of John the Revelator exiled to the Isle of Patmos, only to discover that this would be the location, would be the situation where he would receive the revelation. And so if I was going to preach for just a little bit, I would preach for a moment and talk about the situation of rejection is really the source of revelation. I could feel goosebumps talking about it, just reenacting that particular mental state. So once again, just to repeat as I'm closing this down, because believe it or not, I'm only about a mile away from my old home. That's how small this area is. We've left my current home and are almost at my old home. But just for your pleasure, and maybe more my pleasure, let me say it one more time. The situation of rejection is the source of revelation, revealing the real you, revealing your uniqueness, what you have to share with the universe, your revelation, your reality. As always, it requires one very special behavior on all of our parts. And that special behavior is to always be brave.